friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast, where East meets West. I'm the host, Dr. Chris Motley, and we have a great podcast today because we always want to make the podcast practical tips and health tips for practical people. And one of my good friends, Miles Adcox, who gave me the privilege of being on his podcast, The Human School, which is an amazing podcast. Please listen to it and subscribe. I just want to say thank you so much, my friend, for coming today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Anytime we get a chance to catch up, I think it's time well spent.
Yeah, man, I feel the same way. And you allowed me to come on to your podcast, and I was telling Miles he's already a veteran at it. You can already tell. I'm not trying to blow his head up. In this podcast, I want to talk about your life. And I also want the people out there listening that we want this podcast to be seriously inspirational, but Miles is one of the leading experts, and I will say that because it's true. In this, I mean, whenever you talk about therapy for people who are in the sports industry, but movie industry, but anyone that's really suffered a lot of trauma in this area and around the world, everybody's heard of Onsite. And I say that very, very supportive. So if you guys are out there listening right now and you've had therapy or trauma, this is the reason I want this podcast to come out. So thanks again, my man, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the kind words, too. I really enjoyed having you on the other day. It was a great conversation. I can't wait for you guys to hear that. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but when it does, it's a special conversation. I always learn from you when I'm in front of you. So
the same. I will say that the best truth bombs, I guess, when they come from you. I have some really great quotes I've heard from you, and I've wrote some of those down because I really love them. And I think that people want to know about you, and I know we talk about that, but I'm really inspired about the Human School, how the podcast came about. But I mean, I like to hear about Onsite, but really want to know about you. Can you give us backstory, insight? Sure. What comes up to mind when you can tell some people about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I haven't answered a personal one in a while, and as you can imagine, it all kind of weaves together in a way. The origin story, there are snapshots and inspirational moments that served as a catalyst to get me into the work in the lane that I now spend my time with Onsite, and then also there's an origin story to Human School, so I'll be happy to talk about any of those. I appreciate your interest in it, but as far as me, I'm a small town Tennessee kid. I grew up in a little town called Hohenwald, Tennessee.
Hohenwald.
Yeah.
Wow, South. Yeah.
A lot of people hear that, and if they don't know it, they immediately say hole in the wall. And it's not hole in the wall, just for clarity purposes. It's Hohenwald. It's a German word it's high forest. It's translated in German.
Really?
Hohenwald. So Hohenwald is a town in south central, I guess, kind of southwest middle Tennessee, about 70 miles straight south or southwest, a little bit of Nashville, about 5,000 people, and it's got a German-Swiss heritage. And so we got a lot of lumber, a lot of trees, and logging is a big industry there. So that's the origin of the name. There is a hole in the wall for clarity, and that's in Montana. If you remember Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
love it.
The hole in the wall gang.
Hole in the wall gang.
Yeah. So
okay.
There's a hole in the wall in Montana, but it's not in Tennessee. But for some, it probably felt like a hole in the wall. But for me, it was a great place to grow up. I am a small town guy at heart, and there's a lot of neat things that came out of it. I also feel really lucky because my parents, we traveled a little bit, not a lot, but we traveled enough that wasn't my only imprint. I got imprinted by the town I grew up in. I feel like the town we grew up in often raises us, and in many ways it did. But I also got to see other parts of the world and other cultures. And Mom and Dad were very generous in their philanthropic endeavors, and always wanted to go on mission trips into Central America and South America and different places. And my mom actually led a mission-oriented trip down to Belize for years. And so even in my teens, I was getting to go see other cultures and other parts of the world. And I think it helped me with how I view the world, how I view humanity, and how I see people now. But if I go back to where I was raised, I'll start there, which was you kind of knew everybody and you were known by everybody. And that comes with some really good things and some really challenging things. In a town that says everybody knows your business,
everybody knows you,
and as I say, it's beautiful in many ways. But I was an athlete growing up. Sports were very good to me. They helped develop me from a character standpoint, as did the home I grew up in. grew up in a great home, an imperfect home. You know, we did a lot of things well, and now there's a lot of things that we've since redeemed and looking at doing a little better from the generation that raised my parents and them that raised me. But some of that caused me to stray a little bit, towards the back half of high school. I started, I've always loved all kinds of kinds. I just love people. And I would be with the people that were never missing a youth group and going to church 3 times a week. I would be with my sports friends. I would be with the outlaws that were breaking the rules. And I just had a part in every little community. But I probably started bending the rules a little much my senior year, and it didn't quite get in the way of getting me into college and then to grad school. But it certainly planted a seed to where I had some wild oats that probably needed to be sown, and I sowed them. I sowed them all the way through college, through grad school, and I'll be honest, on the back end of grad school, about 2 years into my vocation, which initially was going to be I was going to get into the sports industry, and so the fact that it's full wraparound, and I now help from a psychology standpoint coach a lot of people that work in entertainment. That's kind of where my origin started in an interesting way, but it was more on the business side.
Really?
I thought I was going to at one point get into broadcasting, and then I had an opportunity to potentially become a sports agent. But right around that time, I had 2 things going. I was chasing I would call it a prominent career for my age. I felt like I outkicked my coverage away. I'd landed in a couple positions that I wasn't really qualified for. But it was great. It stretched me and it grew me. But I had this other side of my life that was still sowing those oats, that was still trying to manage some internal stress that I just didn't really have anything to call it at that time. I had no language, I had no experience, and I didn't know anything to do with it. And so I did what we often do with it, which is when your nervous system gets dysregulated, you numb it. And I numbed it in a lot of creative ways, in a lot of dark ways. And I had kind of a dark light side of my life then. And as you know you've worked with a whole lot of people. I have too now. It's very difficult to sustain that. When you compartmentalize things and you're not super integrated. And that's where I was as a young 20-something. And that led to a pretty challenging case of depression. And I had probably had bouts off and on of that. I just didn't know what to call it, earlier on. And it hit me like a wall, though, in my early 20s. And it got to a point where numbing and medicating it wasn't fulfilling as it go. You know this story. You've heard it 100 times. It works until it doesn't work. And it just didn't work for me anymore. I felt unfulfilled and started to get really tired, and it started to show up a little symptomatically. I was losing weight and just wasn't living well, wasn't eating well, and running through relationships and all the things we do when we're kind of running from our pain story. And thankfully, I think we get a lot of different angels in our lives that come along at the right time. And I had a few of those by way of, a football coach that just saw the best in me early on and never gave up on me, to my mom. I call her my interventionist. She was the one, and still is to this day. Nobody knows me better than that woman. But she saw me and took a chance and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I finally opened up to her, and she helped me start to put pieces together to get into counseling and start to look at my story. And I'm going to collapse it a little bit, and I'm happy to go into any detail that'd be helpful. I just don't want to bore you guys.
You're not boring. This is what we want to hear.
Too much of the backstory. But because I had kind of a bumpy entry into the counseling arena as a client or a patient. But once I found my groove and I landed with somebody who I could immediately tell that I didn't see an expert, I saw another human. I knew it was an expert because I knew they had a lot of letters behind their name and they'd been doing it a long time. But there was an energetic exchange with this guy, and immediately I felt all parts of my story could be held by him and not judged. And I'm not sure I'd felt that before. And it's not that the people around me and my caregivers weren't judging me. I was judging me. I was such a harsh critic of where I had landed at that time, and I just couldn't give myself a break. And I couldn't believe I had this condition, and God forbid, I need help for it. Getting help is that was one thing in my culture that I didn't get a lot of influence around. You figure it out. That's what you do. And that was kind of my mindset until it wasn't, and it didn't work. And then when I had that exchange, I feel like that was a significant catalyst. It was just the energy that I felt that first session. Now, we did a lot of great work together. Ultimately, he encouraged me to, I should tell this part of the story really quickly because it was really interesting. And I borrowed this a handful of times with other friends now that I've worked with. But he said, there's one of two ways we can go here. There's parts of your life that definitely are unmanageable. I agreed. It was obvious. We can continue. Seems like we got a little traction. You agree? We built a good connection. And I was
definitely.
yeah, I got you. I'm in. And he said, we can do this once a week for about a year. Or there's a kind of a specialty track for some people who I think can really grab this information and go quickly with it. And he said, I think you're one of those. He kind of set me up as if I was getting something special. And he said, you would go somewhere for like 30 days and you'd get education and support. And it's kind of like getting all this information in a real boot camp kind of way, like a firehouse kind of way. So he literally presented rehab or treatment to me as if I was special to get to go. and it was kind of brilliant, honestly.
Brilliant.
And you know what it was brilliant about? It wasn't just a reframe like we do in our space all the time. He believed it. He believed so much in somebody getting an opportunity to disappear for 30 days to work on their story and to reconcile the parts of their story that weren't serving them, that he sold it like it was a privilege and like I was getting to go to college or grad school. And I, of course, I didn't necessarily, I felt up front because I trusted him so much. I was like, I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't even think about it until I was on the airplane. I was just like, okay, you mean, okay, I can do this quicker than a year? Let's go. What do I do? So next thing you know, I'm headed out to a place in Arizona, and my parents were awesome to support me to go. But it was really on the way out there when it hit me what I was actually doing. I was like, oh, wait a minute. For a minute there, I thought I was going somewhere because I had earned my way into some kind of opportunity, and now I'm realizing I'm going to the nut house because life's not working out. And I'd not even looked at a website. I didn't even really consider what I was doing. So immediately I was like, wait, what am I doing? Is this going to have padded walls, no doorknobs? And, where am I going? Because I had this real clouded bias or confusion about what it is to go places and get help. I never had any experience with it. Thankfully, in today's world, a lot more people know that's a normal thing and that a lot of people go do. But boy, it was exactly the way he sold it to me. After a week. Now, first week I bucked it, like a wild colt. I didn't want to be there, and I called my travel agent every day to try to get me back home. But once I gave it a week, I started to learn a new language. And I let my shoulders down for the first time. I started to breathe a little deeper. And I just ate it up. I'm telling you, I loved it. And it was an awakening for me that not only was it going to be a catalyst to change my life, it was going to change my vocation.
Wow.
And I knew.
Wow.
About 2 weeks in, I had a 60-page treatment plan with all the stuff about me that wasn't working that I needed to work on. And on the back of it, I wrote a 60-page business plan. So 2 weeks into treatment, I was like, I'm going to do this someday. I'm going to start one of these one day. And really? As far as I knew, I was the only one. I didn't know they were all over the place. I was just like, everybody I know needs the opportunity to come do this.
Yes.
And I started to see it the way it was initially handed to me. And so that's a good chunk of the first part. And I don't want to just talk forever about the story, so I'll pause for a minute.
I love this.
But I'll say that my origin story, getting an opportunity as a young person to experience and bump into my own adversity, my own trauma. And I could get into specifics, and I would imagine it'd be relatable to a lot of you that might be out there if you're stuck and struggling, from sexual abuse survivor to substance challenges to other traumatic things that I experienced. But I had an opportunity to face my adversity head on with what I feel like is a gift of people to be able to help me piece my life back together at a very young age.
Yes.
And I've never forgotten it, and I've never lost my passion since about helping other people do the same.
I really mean this. I really love hearing you talk. So I would love when you keep talking, and because when you saying the words of being on the plane and going out there, and when you were going out there, because people listening, when you said that you had to face on a trauma, like a sexual trauma or abuse, how long did it take? You said after a week your shoulders dropped. But when people normally, when they have that kind of trauma, does it take them a certain amount of time to finally be able to face it? Is there like a norm? They get to a spot, they know they're hurting. They probably put up walls like nobody's going to know how I feel. You understand how people's psychology works. How long does that usually take? When you were there, you're like, no, I need to face this dead on. Was there like a switch? You just like, because you were hearing yourself talk about the problem, you know what I mean? Like you're allowing yourself to hear your own problem?
Yeah, I think becoming self-aware about what I was dealing with was a huge part of it. And I'm glad you asked that. In a way, that was a really gentle reframe, even for me, to make sure that I'm not overselling this to people who might be in it, because it wasn't an overnight switch and everything was better, for sure. But it did inspire me. It was the starter. It was the catalyst. And since then, but now, 20 years on the other side of the profession and having been mentored by a lot of brilliant people in the trauma space, and I've learned a lot too from having worked with thousands of people. Trauma is really interesting, and so are people who've experienced it, because everybody's wired a little differently. And I think we have found some uniform application with certain tools, and there's certainly people that have done more research than me that have found certain pattern recognition about how people move in and out of trauma. But for the most part, it's a pretty individualized process.
Yes.
And so for some, I have seen people come into a residential program and they take it and run with it, and they're able to apply the tools and go live a kind of different life. It's not that they're not going to experience setbacks, because setbacks are part of the human condition. Nobody escapes those. Yeah. So you're going to have those, but setbacks for a trauma survivor, when your trust has been broken, when you're in a constant state of survival, setbacks feel a little different often to a trauma survival. Yes. It can feel life and death. But I've seen people be able to grab it early on and roll with it. I've seen others, and I would say I fall a little bit in more to this category. It's had to become a practice, and I still practice it. I still practice recovery tools. I've been at it for a long time. Yeah. I'm a different human today, but it's because I believe as much in the emotional side of fitness as I do the physical side of fitness.
Wow.
And I happen to like it, so that's fun. Whereas I've got buddies that love to exercise.
Yes.
I don't love to exercise. I will exercise, especially like if we go on a run. Yeah. But I'm more doing it because I want to go running with you. And maybe we talk, maybe we don't, but I just think you're fun to hang with.
Oh, man.
But whether it's a person I want to be with or a game we might play, I'm highly competitive and love sports, so that's a good form of exercise. But when it comes just like, let's go smash some cardio at the gym, I'm like, you mean that's fun? Sounds horrible to me. But if it's like, let's go process our feelings and emotions, I'm like, I'm in. Weirdly, I just naturally was drawn to it, especially having spent most of my life never doing it and boxing in so many emotions. Once I got an outlet and I got the language and the tools, I was like, let's go. So for me, it's been a daily practice. It is a daily practice. And for most, it's that way. And I would say, if you think about just the stages of change, every human being goes through these natural stages of change. And the one we don't talk about much is the last one, which is relapse.
Oh, yes.
And so relapse into behaviors and patterns is a normal process of the natural stages of change. Really? And we talk about it often because, if you're in mental health, trauma, addiction, relapse can be dangerous. Really? Especially it can be life-threatening for a lot of people. And so I think that's why we're kind of scared of it. But if you're somebody who's trying to change and reorient your life to overcome historic obstacles, I've learned to get comfortable with it and have a relationship with it. Like it's at the table for me. And I can control the volume more than I used to. Yeah. But it's normal. So I would say for most people that are recovering from trauma, including me, it's a little bit like this. Yeah. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, but ideally the trajectory would kind of go like that.
Because as you're going up and down, as you're saying, you can control the volume. You're able to use the tools to control the volume. So even if you had a little bit of a dip, you're able to control the volume of how you approach it to go up. And what happened when you got done? Now, when you built that 60, like that business plan, did you jump right back into Nashville and start it up? What happened there?
Well, one of the first things I decided to do was to leave my career and see wherever I could get experience in a place like this. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I hadn't told this story in a long time. I'm not even sure if I've told this one, but there was you actually know him, I think. He's since passed, but you know him, I think. But I'll tell the story about him because without him, I don't know that I would have quickly gotten into the space that I'm in. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Lee McCormick. He was a guy who grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. His family was in the grocery business, and they were part of a company that raised their own beef. And so they had a few ranches in Colorado and Tennessee and in Central Florida. And he was living on the one in Tennessee when he had an experience like I did, went through some challenges. He was 10 years before me. Mm-hmm. And ironically, we went to the same place.
Really?
And I didn't know him, but he had gotten into the business. He'd started a residential program, small 10-bed, 12-bed program, and it was called The Ranch in Nunley, Tennessee. Oh. And but at that time, when I was getting done with my experience, I met somebody in the space that was leaving the program they were working at, and they'd been in the field for a while. They were going to partner with at that time, the vice president of development for the Betty Ford Center, which the Betty Ford Center was kind of that was the big brand in the treatment business at the time. And they were going to Malibu to open up a sober living home or a transitional living home for women. Mm-hmm. And I just said, do you need an intern? And they said, well, sure. And I said, do you mind if I tag along with how you go through the planning phase and the strategy phase and then how you put the pieces together to open a place? And they were like, yeah. And I said, I'll work for free. And I just need a place to sleep. And so I went out there. They had an apartment in Malibu, and I went and slept on the couch for 6 weeks and got to see that process. And through that process, I got to go meet other treatment professionals. 3 or 4 weeks in, I'd get invited to little things. We'd go visit other programs, and I was kind of getting to know the landscape. One day there was a group of treatment professionals that were meeting at a place called Peace Park in Malibu, which was 300, 400 acres. I may not have that right, but it was owned by a guy named Fred Siegel. And Fred Siegel, you might know the fashion brand.
Yeah.
Pretty legendary fashion brand out in L.A. I think Fred may have passed as well now. But I think Fred Siegel's still around. But he that was his personal residence, but he was wanting to turn it into a residential program, and somehow he got connected with. All right, well, I had forgotten this story. All right, so I get invited to go, and it's a bunch of treatment professionals. They're all wearing suits. It's kind of the who's who in the treatment business. I didn't know any of them, and I didn't have a suit, but I felt like I was the guy that kind of jumped the fence to get in.
Yeah.
And I got in there, and I was like, good, this is where I want to be. I want to meet these people because I want to learn from them and do what they do. But when you're at a party and you just feel like you don't fit in?
Lots.
That was that gathering. I was like, I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I was in sweats and everybody was dressed up, and I was like, man, I feel totally uncomfortable. I tried to meet a couple people, but I was just like, I just don't think this is tracking. So I looked around and I saw a guy in painter's pants and a T-shirt and a hat, and he was as casual as I was, and I thought, okay, there's the landscaper. And I was like, I'm gonna go talk to him because I felt comfortable talking to him. Maybe he feels as out of place as I do. And it ended up being Fred Siegel. It was the guy that owned the joint. And
that's amazing.
And I just went up to him, and I actually went up to him not knowing who he was. And he said, well, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Tennessee. I just jumped the back wall to sneak in. And it was his place, and he loved it. He got a kick out of it. And he said, really? He said, come with me. And so he took me in his office, and he said, man, I don't much like being here either. He said, I don't love these social gatherings. He said, I just like the outcome it may produce. Wow. And so I went in there, and he said, tell me about your story. And I said, man, here's who I am. Here's what I want to do. Here's how I see the world now through this new lens, and I can't wait to go be a part of this. And he said, can I introduce you to somebody? And I said, sure. He said, I've been talking to a guy, ironically from Tennessee, who has a similar story, who I've called out here to help me build a program. And it was Lee McCormick. And he was at that event, and he called him in the office and said, Lee, I want you to meet this guy. I think he should work with you. That wild?
That, to me, it's like when all the pieces fit together, all the puzzle pieces. So you meet Lee McCormick. I love stories. This is like, so you meet Lee and you start to converse, and there's no coincidence that you wore sweats. And I'm seriously, there's no coincidence. And he's wearing like the painter pants. You meet him, you start to get a rapport with Lee, and you guys start to hit it off, and like you went to the ranch and helped him there, and
yeah, Lee was great. He and I hit it off, and he'd been around the treatment business for a little while at that point, but he was kind of like me. He was a cowboy at heart. He was a cattle guy and a horse guy, and I'm a horse guy. I loved horses, and so we hit it off on a number of personal levels, but also our stories started to line up. And he said, I've got a program, a small program, but I don't have anything for you to do there, and you don't have any experience or qualifications to necessarily be there. And I said, well, I'll take anything you got. because I was in a position where I did okay in my last job, and I was able to tuck some things away to be able to go spend 6 weeks interning out west, and then also when I got back here to take whatever I could get.
Yeah,
I just want to get my foot in the door and learn it. And I think God at Lee gave me that opportunity, and so did his partner, Julie Norton, at the time. They both gave me a great opportunity, but it was initially, he said, I don't have anything. You could do a little work on the farm side, because he had a working cattle ranch on one side, and I think it was maybe 12 or 16 beds to start, a residential treatment program for young adults on the other side. And it was primary substance use up front. And he said, you could work over there and maybe there's something that'll pop up on the other side. And I was like, okay, I'm down. And so I went and started helping the guys with the horses and cows a little bit. And then a driver position opened up. And he said, you want to drive? And I was like, sure, I'll drive. And driving meaning is where you have a van and you drive and you pick up a client at the airport, you bring them back to treatment, or you take somebody from treatment back to the airport to go home. And then you're transporting clients to 12-step meetings and other things. And I remember that was the only thing I needed was an F endorsement on my license. So I had to do an F endorsement test to be able to transport people.
Yeah.
And that was my first gig in the treatment business, was a driver.
And you're at his, development. As you progress, you start building up. What was your first client like? I mean, if they call him client or patient, what was that like, or how did that develop? And I know you can't say anybody's name or anything, but was it, you felt prepared, or was it one of those situations where you're like, here it is, Miles, here you go and start, or what happened there?
Well, there wasn't much training to be a driver because they didn't expect much out of a driver other than to get the client to and from safely. You know, if anything, we were trained not to really talk to the clients and just we had a protocol. But that wasn't in my nature. It was a means to an end to me. I just started there because I wanted to get my foot in the door, and I knew I wouldn't be there long. I was determined to find a way to learn this program so that I could eventually be able to start my own. And I told Lee that was my intention up front. And he was like, great, come on, I'll show you what I know. And he ended up moving to California. I didn't get a lot with him up front, but I did, after a few years. But I don't remember the first person I picked up. That's a great question.
Oh, even then.
But I do remember picking people up.
Yeah.
And I remember that we were really missing an opportunity by not having training and support for the very first person that they come into contact with when they're coming into an immersive treatment experience.
That's amazing.
And I swore then that if I ever have my hands on an opportunity to train a transportation team and make them a part of the clinical team so that everybody is a part of the client's care, that the first person that picks them up looks in their eyes and they feel the exchange I had from Dr. Swanson all those years ago.
Wow.
And so I started practicing that as a young driver. I saw it as like, man, I'm an important part of this team because I'm the first person they meet, and I can either give them assurance, empathy, love, confidence, or I can keep in my own lane and let them sit in fear and hope that the clinicians can work it out when they arrive. And so I had some of the best conversations. And one of the most beautiful things, I only got to do that for maybe 2 months before another opportunity opened up.
Yeah.
And, but it was I got to be there long enough to see people complete a cycle.
That's amazing.
And picking somebody up after they come in and after completing a successful stay in residential treatment and the lights are fully on in their eyes, and then you get to bring them back and hear about their experience. It was probably the most poignant and beautiful way I could have got into the space. And from there, I got to really work every position all the way up to, I'll never forget the day. It's a really funny story. I hope it's not too much of my backstory, but
no, this is it. This is what I love.
You got me into it, and I'm just going down memory lane. But it's a funny story about how I ended up getting to run the ranch. It was several years in, and I'd kind of been in just about every position. And at that point, I started to do a whole lot of training on the clinical side and getting mentored by a lot of great people, getting certifications and trained and education on my way through, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go strictly clinical or stay on the administrative side or do a little bit of both. So I wanted to get as much experience as I could. But at that point, I had retooled the operation because I'm old, so the database was in a 3-ring written binder. And I was like, wow. So we got to get that digital. And so I never will forget getting our first CRM and getting all the people's names transferred over. And then systematically, whenever I'd go to the owners and say, here's a problem, I think we ought to fix it because we got a great program, but this is a distraction because we're not managing the operation well. If we could do this, anything I'd bring to them, they were like, great, do it. And I look back on that and I thought, were they crazy to turn a 20-something-year-old guy loose on an organization? And I thought, thank God they did, because they just gave me the freedom to go in, roll my sleeves up, and solve problems I didn't know how to solve.
Yeah.
But I've always been a curious problem solver. I just enjoy it. And so I would get in there and I'd clean up all the systems. And then I was 30, I think, at that time. And I'd been there for several years. And at that point, I had it was on the management team. We didn't have much of a management team. We were small, but we'd grown it. We'd probably doubled it in size. And they said, I went to them and I said, look, you need somebody to run this thing that has experience. Yep. You need a CEO. Because we never had one. We kind of had it like a lot of small programs. You have an operations person and a clinical director, and you hope they come together and figure out how to make the silo of a business and a really mission-oriented process work. Yeah. And it's tough to do.
It's very tough.
But we had that set up, and I said, we need a CEO. And they said, great, go find one, just like they would do on any problem. And at that point, I'd been around the country meeting all the professionals, and so I had more contacts probably than they did. And I was like, okay. So I went out to try to recruit. And I, was calling people I knew that had mentored me, been in the field a lot longer. And we'd started to build a reputation at that time because I really was pushing trauma care into that model. Mm-hmm. We were an extended care substance use program. In other words, what that meant at the time was people would go to 30 days at Cumberland Heights or 30 days at Caron Foundation, mm-hmm. or 30 days at Betty Ford. And then they come to us for 30, 60, or 90 days of follow-up work. Mm-hmm. What I started to notice then was they'd done great primary substance use work, mm-hmm. and they were in no way ready to go integrate that work and live a fulfilling life. Oh. They might have been prepared to be sober,
but not to have a fulfilling
to have a fulfilling life. And I thought, what's underneath the substance that we haven't talked about yet? And it was trauma. And at that time, that was early before residential programs were really even treating trauma.
Yeah.
We were one of the first to hang out that shingle to say we want to specialize in treating psychological trauma in a residential substance use setting. There was, Sierra Tucson, the Meadows. There were a couple that probably predated that, but but we did it, and so we started getting a reputation. And suddenly, when people realized we were going to do something a little different than what they did, we got full. And we had a kind of national, so it wasn't that hard to get people interested in us because we had good brand equity at the time. Yeah. So we get a few people. I get 3 candidates, and Julie lived in Tennessee. Lee lived in California at the time, and there was a little bit of a conflict there where they weren't able to make it for the interviews.
Gotcha.
So I'd flown 3 people in, and I found out the night before at 8 p.m. that they couldn't be there. Lee was out of town, couldn't get, and so I was like, what? And so I literally Googled how to interview a CEO. Totally. I went to the mall and I went to Macy's and got a suit. And
this is amazing. This is what I want to hear.
Sewed up the next day, and I had my little notes, and I interviewed these guys. I'd never done an interview in my life, really. No, that's not true. I'd done a few at that point because for the company I was working with, but I'd never interviewed in a C-suite. I didn't know what to ask or what to do.
Yeah.
But I just used instinct and research, and I was a little embarrassed. I was apologetic to them that they couldn't be here, but it went fine. And I got a candidate I liked, and I called them and I said, I think this is who you need. Here's the package I think you could get him for. I made my pitch to them, and I'll never forget that phone call. It was another one of those pivotal moments where they said, we found our candidate too, and it's you. So we don't want to interview anybody else. We want you to take the job.
Wow.
And I look back and I have so much gratitude for both of them for giving me an opportunity. Once again, I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
That seems to be a theme for me. It's just put me in something I don't think I'm quite ready for. Yeah. And they let me figure it out. Cause I thought I had some clinicians on staff that were 20 years my senior. Yeah. And I was like, I can't manage these people. How are they going to respect me? And I tried to talk them out of it. I was like, thank you, but I'm just not qualified. I got to be honest with you. I need more time. I need more experience. And they just wouldn't take no for an answer. They said, we want you to do it. And so finally I accepted the gig, and I got an opportunity. That was where I first kind of clipped my wings on how to run a program. Wow. And what I learned right away was if I'm going to be effective as an administrator, I've got to be respected by the service providers.
That's amazing.
Service providers, i.e. in our
That's great.
space, were clinicians.
Yeah.
And I need these clinicians to understand that I am ingrained in their world. I know their world, and I want them to have trust in that I have a clinical acumen on myself. Because if I just go in there and all I care about are a bunch of numbers, then it's going to be difficult for us to bridge and create a product that is really different and unique. And so I jumped wholeheartedly into that, and I became not so much a leader of them, but more of a student of them. And also by way, we trusted each other, and they got behind me, and man, we built something really special there in those few years I was at the ranch. That was a long way to get there.
I love it that you said that you became a student of them. And when you transitioned to develop Onsite, I know it may be jumping to another time, but you become a student. That's one thing I really appreciate about you, is that you can tell that you're always inquisitive. And I think that if you put your hands, and you said I was just thrown in there, I think some of the best practitioners I know are the individuals who put their hands into every part of a system to try to learn everything or do as much as they could. And that it helps you not to have being held back by fear, because you tried so many parts of that system. It sort of makes you a better clinician. And that's what, when you started Onsite, you started with, was it substance use? Did you feel like, okay, I'm going to go start Onsite? Did it just happen like organically, or did you say, okay, my time at the ranch is possibly like coming to an end. I feel like I'm led to a bigger event, and you got the place out in West Nashville, or how did that all develop there?
Yeah, there's a long story there. I'm going to try to give you an abbreviated version, but there's a long Onsite story that's really cool too, that kind of got me to the dance there. But the shorter version is, taking a substance use program and turning it into more of a primary trauma program that still treated substance use, but we started raising our hand and saying, hey, if we don't co-occurringly treat the stress that the alcohol or the substances are medicating, then are we really setting people up well? And that was innovative at the time, and it was also controversial at the time.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of the substance use industry and the addiction industry, they really didn't buy into the idea that you could treat trauma and substance use co-occurringly. They said one has to come before the other, and in their case, substance use always came first. They said until somebody's sober for a long time, you can't really touch their trauma. And I made the case, I was like, well, that's great, but we have a terrible outcomes when it comes to substance use programs around the country, and I run one. I'm not scared to say it. Yeah. And so what can we do to look at improving our outcomes? I think most people relapse because of untreated trauma.
Yes.
And I think, trauma, anything, all pathology, I believe, any resistant to change, stuck behavior, I think is rooted in some type of psychological compound stress or emotional psychological trauma. And if that is a catalyst for most of us, and that might be why we go create maladaptive behaviors by way of mental health conditions or substance use, then why wouldn't we look at the origin?
That's great.
And largely it was a symptom treatment process, around the industry. So, sorry, I didn't.
No, keep going. I love this, because I was going to ask you, but that's like when you started developing that, going into trauma, when it started to occur that they were coming to you, were you getting as good results or better results, like because you're starting to really dig into their trauma?
It wasn't just that the business picked up. It was, we were getting really good breakthroughs. And we were also attracting some incredible clinicians, because there were great clinicians out there that wanted to do it. And they were like, we're with you. We feel like, we're getting trained in this, and we're doing it in bits and pieces in private practice, but we're not seeing it done in a cohesive way in a residential setting. And so it suddenly became kind of a trend in a way that, like, wow, the ranch is really doing something innovative. And to Lee's credit, he was an innovator. He was a little controversial in our space, but he was a cowboy. He would take swings and risk, and he infused a lot of out of the box, what today people would consider pretty woo. He infused a lot of spirituality into it, and a lot of neat things that just made it a really special program. And I think he and I and a lot of the other pioneers, a lot of them that work with me now at Onsite, which is cool. Yeah. We created something so special there. And how we got to Onsite was we were an extended care program, and suddenly the reference that would send people to a Betty Ford and then to us, they would see better results out of the extended care than they did the primary. And so people started calling us on the front end and saying, I don't want to waste this much money to send me to 30 days of substance use treatment when I'd rather invest in 90 days with you guys.
Wow.
And I was like, well, we're not necessarily, they need 30 days before they come to us. But we finally changed that. What I saw there, working in the crisis business, which I skipped a few chapters. I did crisis intervention there for a little while alongside some of the stuff at the ranch. But working in the crisis business, which when you work in substance use and residential settings, a lot of people get to you by way of a crisis in their life.
Yes.
Something's really not working. Something's falling off. It's a DUI. It's a divorce. It's something. The consequences of the disease is really catching up with them.
Oh, that's good.
And when you're in the crisis business, you get to see, I guess I'd have to call it grace. If you're doing it right, you get to see grace not at a conceptual or an academic level. You feel it.
Wow.
It's palpable.
Wow.
Because not many places do you get undistracted people who come to you arguably at their worst, and you get to hold up a mirror and see, I see your best still. Yeah. It's there. And you see people experience grace. I've always heard it said, in 12-step communities, a lot of 12-step programs are in church basements.
Yeah.
Hats off to churches for opening up their spaces for the 12-step community. But I've heard it said before that if you want to hear about miracles, go upstairs. If you want to see miracles, go downstairs.
Oh, man.
And I think that's true. And I think that's why I've always been drawn to the recovery community is because they're just honest and authentic and out loud. And when I saw that in a residential setting, I thought, man, there's something about people on the back end of their worst that is really informative for how we move about the world and how we pull people together. It was before vulnerability was trending. It was before authenticity was trending.
Before that.
It was just before all that stuff, before Brené's big TED Talk broke and kind of made that pop culture cool.
Yeah.
So it was still, everybody kind of had their cards close. And we were in a setting where everybody threw their stuff on the table. And I was like, how do you make this available to the worried well, to everybody else? Man. Because it feels like the people lucky enough to receive this kind of love and grace and tools are the people who have a big faceplant moment in life. And should it only be reserved for them? Is there another setting? Is there another way that you could create this kind of gut level, we got you. We want to hear everything in your pain story, all the parts of yourself that you're ashamed of. We want to hear it. We want to work with you on it. We want to see how we can help optimize your life and your relationships. And I thought there's got to be a way. Because I loved working in crisis and I felt it limiting a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I would look out in the world and I would see a world that felt pretty stuck and stressed and saw statistics rising everywhere. And I thought, how do we get them? But there was something I learned in the residential setting that was unforgettable.
Yeah.
Which is if you can limit distractions and you can pull people into a contained environment where as much emphasis is put on around healing is put on the environmental elements as it is the clinical or therapeutic models, then you've got a unique formula.
Wow.
And I obsess about all the environmental elements of healing.
Yes.
Like every blade of grass is on purpose out at Onsite. But I wanted to be able to offer that to other people. And so I got obsessed with, I know you can't get everybody you know and put them in 30 days of treatment.
Yes.
The world's just not set up for that. People aren't going to go take 30 days off and go look at their story unless, well, first of all, most people would have to have a privilege to do that because you get the vocation. It's all kinds of things in the way of that family responsibilities. But what could you do? Yes. So I started looking at the personal growth space, and I was trying to learn from guys like Tony Robbins and some of the pioneers. Like, well, they're doing transformational work, but they're calling it self-development and personal growth. And I liked it, but it lacked, in some ways, clinical roots and proven therapeutic modalities. And I thought, I wonder if you could take really good psychology and then kind of the pop culture self-help thing and create a middle model. Because the people that were coming to his seminars, and I know him now, he's a great friend, and I respect what he's done for all these years. And even early on, back in his heyday, there were some of his modalities I didn't agree with. I thought they were a little bit too controversial in your face. But now I look back on his timeline and what he's done, and it's remarkable. He's been a pioneer when it comes to transformation and change for normal people. Yeah, there's no normal people, by the way, but the people who haven't had some big crisis. And I wanted to create that. I really, really wanted to create that. And I thought it might be by way of seminar. But the what I found in the seminar business, and I didn't ever do it, was they were missing one piece. Everybody would come and they would get a hotel room at a Marriott, and they would go to a ballroom for 6-7 hours a day, and they would be immersed in a change process. And then they would go back into the world and turn on cable TV and get on their phones and go out and you kind of pierce the container. And I really think really good change, and I think you're really good at this too, curating a container. Because when you get into your work, and I will disclose I've been a client of yours and worked with you, you don't feel like I'm only there for this session. You feel like you've been invited to a way of practicing and thinking and being and exploring and getting curious about what's happening with your whole system. You start thinking about your organs. I never thought about my organs before I met you. It's like, oh, wow, your gallbladder is pretty important. Oh, man, the liver is pretty important. Oh, wow, it's tied to this and this. And it's almost like you create a container that people stay in, ideally throughout the lifespan of their working with you, and you hope they continue on.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't the way I was seeing therapy. It was kind of like 50 minutes in, we shuffle you right back into the world. And I wanted something where people could come and stay in a curated environment. So I, at that time, I started looking for property, and I wanted to try to see if I could create something that would be really special. Well, the origin of the Onsite story is I met a guy, Gary Seidler, who owned a publishing company called HCA Publishing, Health Communications Inc., HCI maybe, I can't remember. It was out of Deerfield Beach, Florida. I remember that randomly.
Yeah.
And he had a great story. He's a good friend. I hadn't seen him in a while, but he was arguably a failed publisher because he had a bunch of books that just hadn't taken off yet. Yeah. And he had one that came to him, and it was Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen.
Yes.
And he was I think this is the way the story goes. He was the 100th meeting they took, and they'd been turned down 99 times. And he decided to take a chance on them. That was Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh, my word.
It ended up being one of the biggest books in history and
wow.
multi-language. And so he exploded overnight. Well, he was friends with Sharon Weichschatter Cruz, who was the original founder of a company called Onsite Workshops Training and Consulting. And Sharon was a pioneer in the codependency movement, the family of origin movement. They didn't really talk about psychological trauma back then, but if they would have had the name, she would have been a pioneer there too.
Yeah.
She basically was somebody who worked in substance use and said, what about the rest of the family?
Yes.
What did we do there?
What do you do with everybody?
So she was... she had a company that kind of traveled and went on site to places and did things. And she had a program in South Dakota that moved out to Arizona that ultimately, it's a long story, but everything was tied together. All the people, it was like I was divinely appointed to somehow land at this place and take it and shorten the name down to what it is and go build it. And so I can't claim credit of founding. A lot of people can say you're the founder of Onsite, and I'm a founder of a lot of versions of it. You know, since I've been there, we've curated a lot of different and really grown it. When I started, we had 9 people on staff, and
wow,
got a little over 200 now, which is really awesome. 200? Yeah. And
look at you, man. That is amazing, brother.
It's been a really cool ride, but I stand on the shoulders of a lot of pioneers and giants in our space. Sharon's one of them, and then she transitioned it and it got to Tennessee. And Gary's important part was I shared with him my vision. You know, he was an entrepreneur who kind of parlays into our space. He was hosting all the U.S. Journal conferences where all the therapists would go get their CEUs. I started speaking on that circuit at that time, and that's how we got to meet each other. But I told him my dream. I said, I need a place. And he said, I might know a place. And it turned out he owned 40% of the property in which we now operate.
Wow.
And the owners at the time, Ted and Margie Klontz, were looking for a succession. And so we started meeting. I was still running the ranch at the time. And it was a year of courting one another. And I ended up buying the property, 68 acres. Now we're at 350. But I bought the original property where Onsite is today. And from those guys, and
wow.
I ran the ranch and Onsite for 2 years.
Together, like at the same time, simultaneously?
Same time. I was just back and forth. And then Onsite at the time, or the ranch at the time, was getting sold. They sold it to, I helped them package it and sell it to a private equity group. And the equity group, I never will forget this. Golly, you're taking me down memory lane.
This is what I love.
I remember this. It was part of Bain Capital, which was, I think was Romney's big private equity arm, Mitt Romney.
Yep.
And if I remember, and it was called Subacute Holdings. It was a division that was starting to try to acquire behavioral health. It was before it got rolled up. You know, our industry got rolled up. It had been rolled up in the 90s before my time, and then it got kind of segregated again, and it was getting rolled up again by Wall Street, which I don't love, but it is what it is. But we were a second acquisition. They got a place out in California, and they were looking at us, and I think it was smart on the owners to do what they did. But in the process, they knew I had bought this little fledgling thing over here.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to stay here. And they said, look, we'd like to keep you and give you some equity of the company. And we'll buy this other thing, this other little pet you bought. Because at the time, Onsite, it wasn't profitable that much. It was kind of struggling. It was, heck, I bought it in 2008. It was the worst time ever to buy a business.
Really? You bought it in 2008? Man.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the economy was crazy then. So I was kind of like, I thought I had just signed my death letter. But thankfully, I had a job still. I couldn't afford to pay myself out of Onsite. So I had both jobs, and these guys put this in front of me. And it's so funny how this works when I think back on it, because they were offering me equity in the bigger company. They were offering to acquire this asset that I didn't really have the money to buy, but I just borrowed and got it. Yeah. And they offered me a job as CEO of both. And they offered me a brand new SUV. And here's what's weird. It's just so funny how it works.
I love this.
So my dad has always been a real conservative fiscally, and he's always ingrained in me. He said, never buy a new car.
Never buy.
Because it depreciates. As soon as it goes off the lot, depreciate. He'll go through his strategy of like, I always get a used car. So I'd never had a new car. I'd always bought used cars. Yeah. And there was something about that new SUV that I had a hard time walking away from. Isn't that weird? Like your little kid comes out in negotiations. Like I was like, yeah, okay, equity in the company, de-risk myself over here, big CEO opportunity. You got a new car in the deal? But yes. I will tell you, up until that point, I could give you 5 other times where I went against my gut, and I went towards the way other people were influencing me to go because it was the smart, practical route, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. Wow. And at that time, I'd done enough of my emotional and spiritual work, and I was grounded in my faith enough to make a different decision. Wow. But it felt like an American Idol moment of business because you had 3 private equity guys in suits sitting across from me at a meeting. And they had said, all right, we need a decision. They represented the plan. And I'll never forget saying, I am so honored and so grateful. And I handed them my resignation letter and said, I'm going to walk away from the ranch. And I'll help you guys in any way I can. I want you to be successful, but I'm going to bet on this business. I'm going to go over here and do this. And one of them said, wow, man. And I highly respect the guy that said this, by the way. I didn't see him, but he looked at me and he said, well, I got to respect your courage. He said, but this will be the biggest mistake you ever make in business. And that was hard. That was a confidence killer walking out the door. But I had a deeper knowing. I was like, I'm supposed to go do this. I'm supposed to go do it. And that was the origin of me getting over to what is now Onsite Wellness Group.
I mean, to me, I love the story because when people come to Onsite, if you're listening, that, when you know who's behind the man behind Onsite, the women too, the therapist, they want to know who they can trust. And that's why I love the story, because when they hear about Onsite, they know it's somebody who's taking a risk, who's taking a chance because you care. You can get this when you listen to like the Human School, because like when you hear him speak, it's very calm, it's very peaceful. And I have 2 questions. Because one, if we could just go over like one of the quotes though, and then we'll talk real quick about Human School, and I want to talk about you. I want to ask you your last question. Yeah. But I love one of your quotes. You say that you want us to live by empathy over action, love over agenda, and grace over advice. Like you put that, and I've studied that, and I don't really go and talk to my friends and text them that I look into those phrases. But when you do that, is that what you start to implement in the Human School? Is it because you wanted to educate people, to teach them about the human spirit, the Human School? Is that what the podcast is about?
That mantra that I try to live and work by,
it's great,
goes all the way back to the original energy exchange I experienced that was a catalyst. And there's been multiple other catalysts since then. You're one of those for me and for a lot of people.
Thank you.
You just have a rested presence that you can tell I'm in good hands. When I'm with you, I'm obsessed with change. And when you really look at change, I saw that the old way of change, which was pretty much a motivation model, it was you get people to move with a carrot or a stick. I either need to push you towards something with a consequence behind it, or I need to invite you into something with a gift that you will get if you receive it. And what I learned, the more you get into the dynamics of change, the way we're biologically and psychologically wired, it doesn't quite work that way. Change is more of, it can, that's not true, it can. People change all the time through motivation. Think of every sports team you've played on and all that. But is it really sustainable change if it's somebody else's idea?
That's a great point.
And I think when you're thinking about transformational and personal change, it has to be a joint idea as best you can make it. And that comes when I have to believe, and I hope all the people that I get an opportunity to collaborate with and work with believe, that whoever shows up in front of me, no matter how dark their story is, no matter how hardened their heart, no matter how broken their esteem, no matter how low their confidence, whoever's in front of me, I have to believe there's a part of them that is divinely equipped to grow, change, and heal.
Wow.
They have the tools in them. And if I ever lose faith in that, then I don't know that I'll be as much use for them as an empath or a guide. But when you believe that, when you believe the person in front of you, then you can drop your agenda and relax, because you realize I'm not some secret weapon that has to come in here and know what to do or say to help you walk through this grief or whatever you're dealing with, because most of us are clumsy around grief and other things. We don't know what to say. And it just takes the pressure off, because you're like, we're in this together. I'm not going to be behind you, pushing you to where I think you need to go. I'm not going to be in front of you trying to pull you where I think you need to go. I am with you. Same story as when people come to you, the guy that was in a hole, and if you're in a hole and you can't really get out of it, first people might walk by the hole and try to hold the map up. And then somebody might try to throw you a rope. And then there's somebody that comes along and they jump down in the hole with you.
Wow.
And you might look at that and think, well, now there's two of us in the hole, you idiot. Why are you down here? And then that's when you get to look at somebody and say, I've been here before and I know the way out. And I feel like
that's great,
if
brother.
more of us in the helping profession or the medical profession or in any profession where we're trying to work with each other, if you're just in a relationship, if you think about being beside somebody instead of in front or behind somebody, you're going to get more internal motivation and less compliance, which I believe is the number one form of resistance and change. And I know it because I did it honestly. It's like I'm the best complier ever when it comes to being a client. Fastest way I can get somebody who's trying to help me by identifying some of my hard parts of my story is to agree with them.
That's right.
And
that's right.
But I think if we join people and we can meet them with love, and we can meet them with empathy, and we can meet them with grace, the rest of the stuff will all follow. So that's why I believe in that philosophy. Human School, I wrote on a napkin when I was coming out of residential treatment, because I was trying in my mind to reframe what I had just experienced. And I thought, I went into this thing and it felt all punitive. It felt like I was going to jail or being punished for my life decisions. I come out of it thinking, what a privilege.
Wow.
What a privilege. Wow. And I said, this is not rehab. This is just Human School. Yeah. It just teaches people how to become better people. Yeah. And I wrote it down. I didn't know what I would do with it, but I always thought maybe one day there'll be something where I could reframe what I believe treatment and therapy and psychology and good change and experiences are all about. And I really just, that's why I try not to, and I'm glad you didn't ask a lot of that today. We very much could have taken it down a clinical route and spent all our time on insider language, and that might be interesting to people too. We can do that another time. But
it'd be fun, but yeah.
We did this on ours the other day too. You're armed with crazy knowledge, but we spent a lot of time just telling stories and probably got to the same conclusion had we used all of our clinical framework. But that's what I want Human School to be, is a set of tools and a place to have conversations that don't feel like they're loaded with insider language and pathology. It's right. Basically taking what I get to see backstage out front and humanizing it. It's just humanizing counseling and therapy. And it's not a counseling and therapy podcast at all. It's just me talking to people who I think everybody has interesting hacks on how to live a better life.
Yes.
Even on your
perfect.
darkest day.
Yes.
The guy one day sober sometimes is a better guy to talk to a guy that has 0 than the guy who's got 30 years. Wow. And everybody's got something to offer. And that's what I want with my guests. I want to get them on there and remind them who they are. And I want to remind them how much value they have. And I want to remind them that they have gifts to share with the world. But I want them to be presented in a relatable way, not in some kind of big agenda. It's like, here's the 3 steps to change. And if you don't do step 2, forget all that fear mess. Let's just be with each other. Let's be people. So that's what Human School is all about.
I'm telling you, that's one thing I appreciate about everybody. When you're on the podcast, you made it so, I said a flow, and it felt very comfortable. And you're right. When people know the story behind you and know that, like, you're with them, like you said, walking alongside them, they open up. And I've noticed that in practice all these years. When I'm not talking at somebody, but when they have a situation or a problem, and I'm trying to figure it out with them. And I've noticed that when I had a lot of ailments, I realized that the people who had the same ailments came to me, and I was like, you know what? I understand what you're going through. You're not crazy. You're not weird. I'm going to go through this with you. And it isn't surprising that there's so many people out there that have been told that it's all in their head and this is you're crazy, but you yourself as a practitioner go, been there, you're not crazy. And those people just go, oh, I finally found somebody. Finally found somebody. One thing I want to ask though, man, we got, if we can, some other time, we got to talk more about, not about clinical stuff. I just love having you on. This is great. One of my favorite episodes, honestly. If you could go back and sit with the younger version of Miles, before all the human school, Onsite, what maybe is one thing that you wish somebody had taught you about just being human? Like, as in, I know it's a broad question, before everything else, like maybe one of the things you said, here's a phrase that stuck in my head, or just a mantra in your head, like what I wish somebody would have taught me before all of it. I know it's a lot.
No, it's a thoughtful question. It's a great question. If I could double for myself at a younger age, and I do frequently, by the way, I think there was a younger part of me at 2:30 in the morning that woke up last night. I've had a little bit of a stressful week, and I've also met with some people that are at the top of the food chain when it comes to what I'm trying to create. And I'm still green and a rookie at it with human school. You're still thoughtful to give me so many compliments. I feel like I'm still learning.
You're doing great, man.
And I had one of those moments last night when I happened to wake up and I started thinking. My mind will turn on at night sometimes. You probably remember that as my practitioner. And it turned on last night, and it started to really implode my system with doubt. Because I got all this great advice from these people who I respect, who've been doing this for longer than I have. But something they said in the middle was, it's so flooded and it's really hard to break through. And the only way to do this is don't get frustrated. It'll take a long time to grow this thing. And I had this moment and that I'm like, I don't know that I've got what it takes to go do something like this. So I was just literally sitting in doubt last night. So what do I do with that? 6 a.m., my morning routine. Like how old was I at 2:30 in the morning in that 30-minute window when I was awake and stressed about, do I have what it takes or should I just hang it up? How old was I? Yeah. And I'll go back, I think it's probably about 16. There was a little part of me that had a setback socially like we do when we're 16 years old. Had a little rejection, and I was right back in that spot.
Wow.
Ironically, nobody was rejecting me except for me. The older part of me was doubting that I had what it takes to go pursue what I'm pursuing right now, because it's more public than what I've done in the past. Everything I've done at Onsite has been behind the curtain. I'm the guy that can pull strings with other people, but nobody really knows I'm there. And then now I'm out front. And it's like, whew, I know you've been a little more public with your socials and with your pod than I have, so you probably got a little more experience. But for me, it was new. And so what I said this morning at 6 a.m. Was I said, you don't have to have a gimmick. Everyone is going to tell you need a formula, and you're going to have to shorten everything you say down to a soundbite. And that's what stresses you out, because it's not you. Wow. You're a long-form communicator. You love story. You're probably going to apologize about how long you talk in the middle. I bet I've done it in the show 2 or 3 times.
4 times. I'm not. You don't need to. You don't ever need to.
But it's me. It's who I am. And some people will like that, and some people won't like that. But if I want to be true to who I am, and I want to stay integrated with the essence of what I'm trying to create, it is all about being authentic and having a rested, authentic presence. That's what I deserve to have. And that's what that kid deserved to have when he was questioning himself at 16, dealing with the rejection. And so I would double, and I guess that's what I'd say everybody I think deserves to have that. If I were talking to my younger self, I would say, you deserve a shot to be you. And not everybody's going to like that. But when you fall in love with it and you start to like who you are, then you're going to love who you're going to become. And I think I'm in that interesting place right now where I'm just becoming. and the fight of old identity and new identity and what I want to bring along and what I want to nurture and have grace on. I'm right there. I'm all up in it.
Oh man, I remember that for the rest of my life. I'm not kidding. Wow. That was a great. That was for me. I mean, that was for me. I know we had to wrap, but one thing though, I don't just say it because we're friends. But one thing when you say, if you ever had a doubt, hopefully a little Motley voice comes to you at that 2:30 in the morning and tells you, in my whole heart, you're meant to do this, like with the human school. There's not many people you see out there that when they have a presence on camera, when you have the way you present, can tell a story. And that's what we're missing a lot, is like people's allowing somebody to tell their full story and allowing them to like express them. So all I can say is keep doing it. Because there's times when you see quality and you see some quantity. And I'm not putting down any podcast, because that's right. We got to put this many out and do this. But when you have quality, you see it. And you got it. So just chew on that, my man. All right. So, Miles, I'm serious. Thank you so much for joining me today, my brother. I hope one day we can do another one because you just bring me a peace. This was like the most peaceful podcast I've ever had. I'm not kidding. This is great.
It's a great way to start the day. It was fun.
Definitely.
Flew by too.
It did. We had a fun time.
It did the other day as well.
It did. We just talked.
Great conversation.
Okay. You have I just can tell people where to get you on IG and just give your location and then let them know where we can find you.
Yeah. All my socials, I believe, are at Miles Adcox. That's where I spend more time on Instagram, I think, but my team's got me on some of the other ones. We're trying to grow all the things, YouTubes and TikToks, and I'm new to all that, but we're trying to grow that. And then at Human School, is the podcast.
Guys, you heard it here. If you guys know anyone that's going through trauma, any type of situation where they know they need healing in the manner that Miles has talked about today and discussed and told great stories, please send them his way. Just connect with him and his team. He's got a great team. Actually, everybody's really super sweet and they care. Man, I wish it didn't have to stop. But guys, thank you for joining us here today. Here at the Ancient Health Podcast, we thank you, Miles. Everybody, until next time, have a great day.